What's up YouTube, welcome back to this channel. Today I have a medium SQL interview question for you. It's part of SQL 50 on LeetCode and it's part of this advanced select and join section. It's called count salary categories. It's marked as medium, so let's get straight into it. Now, our task is to write a solution to calculate the number of bank accounts for each salary category. The salary categories are low salary, average salary, and high salary. All the salaries strictly less than 20,000 are considered low salaries. Anything between 20,000 and 50,000, including these numbers, would be considered an average salary, and a high salary would be everything strictly greater than 50,000. The result table must contain all three categories. If there are no counts in a category, we should return 0. Return the result table in any order, and here's an example of the result format. So our input table would have an account ID and income, which would probably be the salary of that person, and our output is a bit different from the norm, maybe because we have two columns, one for category, and then we have that salary tier of low, average, and high. And then in the other column, accounts count, we have the amount of accounts in that tier. Yeah, that's pretty much it. So let's think about how to get there. So the main problem really here is this categorization into low, average, and high salaries. I think the input table is quite easy in terms of just having the salary right there and an account ID, which we might not even need, that ID. And the output is in that format of having category and the count of accounts in that category. So let's think about how to categorize these. Obviously, we're gonna have to do sort of like this comparison of less than 20,000, but how do we sum these up? We don't have the category in there already to group by and count or anything. We have to make that comparison ourselves. When I'm trying to count a column based on a certain condition, I always think of this case when then statement. And in this case, we want to check the case of the income being lower than 20,000 for the case of having the low salary. I'm assigning 1 here if it is less than 20,000 and 0 if it isn't. And I do that because I want to count every instance of the income being less than 20,000. That's why I'm counting it as 1, and I'm counting 0 if it isn't, because I don't want to have that contribute to the count. The way I'm counting is by wrapping this with a sum function. So it's just gonna add up those ones for every time we have an income that's less than 20,000. So it would go through here. This would be a 0. This would be a 1 because it's less than 20,000. This would be a 0. This would be a 0. And we would have what we want. So let's call that accounts count because that's what the output has. And yeah, I need to specify that we're selecting from this accounts table. And then we should just get that count, which should be 1 with the example data because we only have one account that's in the low salary category. So that's all good. So how do we get that into the output format now of having another column? This is a technique that I don't use that often, but it applies here and it can be very powerful. So let's do it. Now, we're kind of hard coding a specific value. We're just specifying the value of the output column by typing it out pretty much. So we're saying low salary as category is the value that we have in category. So we basically just write a specific string or word or sentence in there and make it appear in the output. And that's how we get that in there. So that can be good for marking anything in your data, testing anything, or just like having a list of things underneath each other. And in terms of adding to that list, so we now did that for the low salary case. Now we want to do that for medium and or average and high salaries. So in order to do that, we want to append to the table. We don't want to have additional columns. Otherwise we could just write it out here in terms of average salary and go on. But then we would have the columns side by side and we want them beneath each other. We want to append stuff. So in order to do that, we need to use union, which will just append information that we specify now underneath what we have up there. So just gonna copy paste the same thing, but make that average salary. And then we need to rework our condition here. So instead of the income being less than 20,000, it should be between 20,000 and 50,000. And we can just write that out exactly as we kind of talk through it, which is awesome. And since that between keyword is inclusive, it includes 20,000 and 50,000. So it creates that inclusive range that we want, which is perfect. So now we just need to do this whole thing again for the high salary case. So let's do union again. We can do that as often as we want to. Call that high salary, and the income should be strictly greater than 50,000. So let's just replace what we had before with that greater than sign, and that should be it. So I'm gonna run this, but what you need to make sure of here is that when you're using union, you have the same amount of columns. So we have category and accounts count, the same name, or otherwise I think it's just gonna take the name of the first column you have, the first part before the first union, and yeah, actually having the same order as well. So just have everything in the same format, and then you can append them quite easily this way. There is also union all, which will append stuff, even though it's a duplicate of what you already had. Sometimes you need that. Here we don't need it because we have different names for each category, and it just treats an entire row as like a single instance and determines whether it's a duplicate that way. So only if everything is the same in the entire row, then it's a duplicate. So it will not be the case here since we have different names for the categories. So we're all good here, just using the regular union keyword. And yeah, I just ran this, it was already accepted, but I can also submit it. And since we can return the result table in any order, it should be accepted. Now we have that case in the question that states that it must contain all three categories. That's what we're doing by selecting it specifically and using union. And if there are no counts in category, return 0. So it's going to go through everything. It's going to assign 0 if there's no account that has that salary category. But maybe, even though it's accepted, if we didn't have any data in the input table, it might not return a 0, but I guess it doesn't make sense to run this against an entirely empty table. So I think we're fine here and it's accepted, but something to look out for. That's gonna be it for that question. I'm trying to go through all of SQL 50, and I think we're pretty much halfway through already with what I have on the channel. If you want to give this one a try, I'm going to leave a link to this question. I'm going to leave a link to the SQL 50 playlist on my channel, and I'm also going to leave a link to the SQL 50 program on LeetCode, or just study plan. That's what they call it, I think. Yeah, but apart from that, that's going to be it, and I'll see you in another video. Bye bye.